newspapers with 3 comedians. I'm Leo Kirsten. Tonight I'm joined by 2 comedians who definitely weren't diversity hires. We've got Paul Cox, the People's Gammon, and he's going to be served with a side of mash. It's Steve N. Allen. Because you're on the MASH report, Steve.
That's very good. I like it.
Thank you.
And also tasty food. It's a double win.
Gammon and mash.
Gammon and mash. The most
It's just fighting crime.
Yeah.
OK, that's the frivolous chit-chat. Let's have a look at tomorrow's front pages. The Daily Mail leads with Britain's broken borders. The Telegraph leads with Russia flooding West with migrants. The Guardian leads with more than 100 Palestinians die in chaos surrounding Gaza aid convoy. The Times has nothing to stop another police killer like Cousins. The iNews has 2p tax cut in doubt after gloomier forecast on UK economy. And finally, the Daily Star has my best friend is on a journey that for now I can't follow. And those were your front pages. And let's have a closer look at those front pages, starting with the Telegraph, Paul.
Yeah, Russia flooding the West with migrants. This is an interesting story. This is quite new to me. I don't know if it's new to you, but Russia is using a private militia to control and weaponise immigration into Europe, the Telegraph can reveal. And the idea is by controlling, this is via Africa, by the way, by controlling immigration into Europe, you can control the outcome of democracy, votes, you know, because obviously diversity is our strength, so the more diversity you get in.
So you can strengthen certain areas by sending lots of migrants there, is that?
Yeah, I'm a bit facetious. Sorry, but there is a lot more to this because this is quite technical. Tactically, he seems to have quite a bit of control over a number of the routes through Africa into Europe.
Well, and he's been doing this for years. I mean, this is a new way he's doing it. So the Wagner mercenaries in Africa are basically moving migrants around and bringing them up to to the migrant channels, but previously he's done it with when he went into Syria to destabilise Syria. He knew that would send a wave of refugees, millions of refugees, up to Europe and destabilise Europe. He's also been flying people from the Middle East and Africa, putting adverts up saying, you know, we'll fly you to Belarus or we'll fly you to St. Petersburg for free and then bus you to the border and then you can have a great time in Europe. So Poland, Lithuania, Finland have had to build extremely strong border fences that Donald Trump would be very proud of.
The more I hear about this Putin chap, the less I like him. Wasn't it better in the old days when it was just like messing with Facebook ads? That was the last time he tried to impact an election over here. Like, oh, there were some Facebook ads that not everyone saw. So it was kind of, he could send a message to you. Some sort of Cambridge Analytica thing. Oh, that was terrible. And now this is what we're getting. It's interesting, though, that I imagine one of the ways to skew an election is to send migrants to an area and then you can probably expect more of a right-wing outcome as people get angry. So are we just playing into Putin's plot right now?
Oh,
so calm down. It's really good.
I mean, it doesn't. Some of it doesn't make sense, does it? Because, you know, once you get into a country, the first thing you don't do is get on the electoral roll and start looking at the candidates who to vote for.
It's not to swing the people aren't actually voting. Although part of the reason that, you know, left-wing politicians are so pro-open borders is that they believe that once those people are in the country and are able to vote, they will vote for...
Well, they'll vote for the people that allowed them in, won't they? That's the idea.
Yeah, the Labour Party admitted that they wanted to rub the right's nose in it and tilt the electoral landscape in their favour. But, I mean, Steve, are you surprised that the dissident right in the West, in the UK, and in, obviously, Republicans, MAGA Republicans in the States, are so pro-Putin?
It's unbelievable, yeah.
When he's doing this to Western Europe and to the UK.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I can understand a little bit of why America cares not that much about what's happening in Europe. They are very much thinking, you deal with your own problem. But it's unbelievable, isn't it, that somehow it's flipped. You know, in the old days, to be a proper American would be to hate those there Ruskies. And now, if you don't like them, you're the best version of what right-wing America has. The world's gone crazy.
And also, with regards to woke culture, gender ideology, critical race theory, there's a theory that the Soviet Union seeded that in Western universities. So we've got Russia to blame for everything that the right is supposedly against, and yet the right seem to love Putin for some reason. I don't get it. Anyway, moving on to the Daily Mail, Steve. What have they got in the front cover?
I mean, there's a picture of Jerry Halliwell and the story about the husband. I imagine with some sort of headline like, if you want to be my lover, I said, get with my friends, not the people you work with. But that's probably not a headline for legal reasons. Britain's broken borders. Watchdog report exposes shocking migration system failings. Things like the border ports on arrivals were unmanned. Their flagship humanitarian schemes have problems. Look, I mean, it's not a great report, and it comes on the back of 1.4 million visas granted. Wow. And this was in part, this is Rishi Sunak promised to get rid of that backlog, and he did it by magic wand. And just saying, yeah. Do you remember that scene in Bruce Almighty where he's God and he gets all these prayers and he just goes, yes? And then hilarity
Oh, I
ensues.
didn't realise Rishi Sunak was in Bruce Almighty.
If I could do deep fakes, I'd do a version of that with Rishi's face, because that would work.
So people were claiming asylum, and they could have been, you know, who knows what their status was, or whether they deserved asylum, or whether they were going to chuck acid in someone's face, or whatever it is. And Rishi was just like, yeah, all of you can...
he cleared the backlog. Credit where it's due. That clears a backlog, doesn't it?
That's not clearing a backlog.
It's moving the backlog into the system.
Yeah.
There's also, look, out of everyone in this building, I'm probably more likely to defend the concepts of migration. But anyone, even if you love it, you need a system that works.
Yeah.
Because a system that doesn't work is even worse. Like a couple of weeks ago, the story of the care homes that didn't even exist.
Yeah.
So visas were given out to pretend carers. They wouldn't even be helping the pretend patients.
Yeah.
No one wants that.
And the worst thing about that is I put my dad in one of those cars and he was just in a multi-storey car park somewhere. Paul, I mean, our immigration system seems to operate like a Ponzi scheme. We're told, you know, we need to keep bringing people in at the bottom because people are getting older and we need people to look after them and generate the economy. But the Ponzi scheme isn't even working well because we're bringing people at the top. We're bringing people in who are dependent on welfare and need schools and hospitals and all the rest of it. So it's ending up costing us way more money.
Yes, and the first thing I saw when I read this story is that this must put a significant amount of pressure on our public services.
Yeah.
Then I read further down in the story, and that's exactly what Suella Braverman said. So I'm now aligned to Suella Braverman, who I'm told is the most evil woman since Margaret Thatcher.
Who was also a great woman.
Yeah, also a great woman. However, there's a lot of statistics going on here, and I think the key one is to bear in mind, and it's the way it's going to be tackled in the future, is that almost half of those visas that were granted were to members of families of the people that were granted, that came here to work in the first place. So by reducing that in the future and increasing the minimum salary, the idea is that you can probably reduce immigration. This is perfectly legal immigration, visas, obviously 1.4 million. Reduce that by a third, or 300,000, so slightly less than a third.
So we'll only have 1 million people coming next.
Yeah, it doesn't solve the problem.
But to be fair, you can't train doctors in half a year, so there is going to be a lag.
You can get a rough idea of what they're doing. Steve, come on.
I've watched a few episodes of House, and I reckon I can solve a few things. Yeah, I'll have a crack at it.
Finally, Paul, we've got The Guardian. What's in the cover there?
More than 100 Palestinians die in chaos surrounding Gaza aid convoy. So Israeli military rejects claims that it fired on a crowd and blames a deadly crush. So there's two sides of the story here. There was aid being delivered into Gaza, and from the Palestinian perspective, they're saying as soon as civilians started crowding around this aid truck, the Israelis opened fire. The Israelis are saying, and 100 people were killed, by the way, the Israelis are saying that, no, that's not true. There was a crush, and that's what caused the death. All I know is all of this is totally harrowing and quite grim, and I'm no longer sure what to believe, because it's just become this sort of tit for tat, and we see these messages. Of course, I see it's in The Guardian, so they're leaning toward the Palestinian side. Had it been in the Mail, we'd have probably seen, you know, the fact that they died in a crush.
Yeah.
I don't know what to believe anymore. All I know is this is just totally beyond the point where I can imagine how bad this is anymore.
Yeah, I mean, what do you make of this, Steve? Because I watched the video and the explanation to me of the crush looked much more plausible than people being fired on. And the reason for the crush is actually pretty damning for Hamas. So people swarmed out around the trucks, and there was a big crush because they were desperate to get the aid, because if they don't, then Hamas take the aid, and Hamas don't distribute the aid to the Palestinian people. They see if they can make something that blows up out of it that they can fire at Israelis.
I mean, the point of the desperation being there is surely, from anyone's point of view, true. The level of desperation that these people have. So no wonder they head straight to those trucks. I mean, I saw someone on TV earlier on saying you need an investigation to get to the bottom of why there was a stampede, whether it was the desperation, whether people stampede after hearing gunshots. But Paul's right. There's so much misery around here because this is war, isn't it? This is the problem with having to talk, you know, do a funny show, and these are the headlines.
Well, it's funny, you know, this is one of the wars that we've got the most footage of in history, and it's still incredibly confusing.
Not just that. There was some lovely footage of the first Gulf War, I remember. Remember the dark and the Scud missiles and the green and all that sort of stuff. However, what we got now is social media.
And, of course, then the WikiLeaks footage came out and revealed that it wasn't such a clean cut. You know, these cruise missiles weren't going down streets and turning corners and taking out targets all the time.
Yeah, I remember thinking at the time, because it was 1991, the first one. I was, you know, sort of 12 years old. I remember thinking how cool these missiles were without any context of what they were doing and why they were doing it. But what we've got now is just endless opinion, and it's we have to stop occasionally. And when I read this, I hadn't seen the footage. We still have to stop occasionally and go, these are still humans. Whatever side they're on, whatever's happening, whether they died in a crash, whether they got shot upon, these are still humans. And it's just, I mean, what a mess.
Yeah, absolutely true. Well, that's the front pages done. Join us in a moment for racial segregation returning to London and politicians who want to kill people. See you in a couple of minutes.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GBNews, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Elon Musk has announced that the first patients to receive a groundbreaking brain implant from Neuralink is recovering well.
This is all a bit odd. The product, called telepathy, uses a robot to surgically place a computer chip in a region of the brain that controls movement.
Yes, Elon Musk says that the first goal is to enable people to control a phone or a computer just by thinking. He says that initial tests show promising signs of brain activity, meaning that patients with paralysis could one day overcome their conditions.
Not sure about this one. Joining us to discuss this breakthrough is applied futurist Tom Cheesewright. Tom, this sounds, well, slightly terrifying.
I certainly think a lot of people will be thinking this is something out of a sci-fi horror rather than reality. But this is a technology that's been a long time coming. We've been developing direct brain-computer interfaces for a long time, mostly for the sort of therapeutic reasons that are the initial goal, at least, of Elon Musk's Neuralink, to allow people who are perhaps quadriplegic to have direct control via their brains of initially a smartphone and maybe ultimately artificial limbs or a wheelchair.
It does seem fascinating how quickly this technology is moving on. I saw demonstrations perhaps a year or two ago of people playing a very simple Pong game just by thinking, moving sort of one line on a screen up and down. This seems like potentially there has been a breakthrough that means far more complex things can be controlled just by thinking.
Well, there's lots of different aspects to this technology. The initial attempts to interface with the brain used actually quite thick prongs almost that went into the brain, and they were quite solid, and so if the brain moved, they could potentially cause damage.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. I'm Leo Kearse. I'm still here with Paul Cox, the People's Gammon, and Stephen Allen, the People's Mash. Kicking off this section with The Guardian, with great news for any racists watching. Racially segregated theatre audiences are back. Steve, tell us more.
Yeah, number 10's not happy. Number 10 condemns London Theatre for hosting blackout nights. Rishi Sunak's spokesperson said it would be concerning and diversive to restrict audiences based on race. This is at the Noel Coward Theatre. Now, to set the scene, if someone said to me, Steve, you can't go to the theatre tonight, normally I'd be like, fine, it's not going to impact my night. But this is news because it's kind of PR to get us all talking about it. By having a night that is, and they phrase it, all-black identifying audience, which is actually better than calling it a blackout night because it's a black
Which they do.
Isn't it? It's the opposite of a blackout night. It's a whiteout night, if we're being brutally honest about it. Here's the kicker, though. The theatre says, while the performance have been arranged for black audience members specifically, no one will be excluded from attending. So it's a nothing.
But people are going to look at you like you've ruined their night out. If you go along as the sole white person...
There is a...
You could identify, can't you? The whole point of this story is that you could... black identify.
No, even if you don't identify, they won't stop you. But, yeah, it would be awkward. There might be some tutting. But I don't know if you ever remember the film Soul Man. Maybe that's what people are going to do. If you've not seen that, I'm sure that's a cancelled film.
Maybe, I don't know.
Do you remember that?
Somebody blacking up.
Yeah, but taking some tablets because there was a university grant. It's an American film from the 80s. He couldn't get into university, but there was one diversity grant available. There is no way that film's available these days.
But it's the only way to get into university.
But if you want to do something radical in terms of getting people to the theatre who wouldn't ordinarily be there, go for working class people. Do like one night where people on minimum wage can win a ticket and they'd be safe in the knowledge that there wouldn't be any middle class people being all snobby around them. Yeah. That's the way forward.
Then the rest of us could go to theatre on the other nights knowing that there weren't any working class.
That's how we do it.
We're going to ruin it now.
Just to say, it's called Slave Play. It opens on the 29th of June.
It's called Slave Play?
Yes. Never made that up.
And it stars...
really going for the racist angle.
And it stars Kit Harington, best known for Game of Thrones, where his character was in The Black Watch. So all of this fits in, doesn't it?
Is he a white guy?
Yeah.
He is not going to be able to perform that night, is he? They talk about white gays a lot in this, don't they? Which at first I thought, yeah, I see the problem. You know, obviously Andrew's our boss.
Like white gays?
Yeah.
White gay people?
Yeah, that's what I first thought, but it's not. It's G-A-Z-E.
Oh.
It's white people staring at black people, which apparently is a bit of an issue. When
yeah, because I read this and they said that black audiences feel unsafe around white theatre goers, and I'm not sure that's true.
Can you imagine?
I haven't seen an explosion of white-on-black crime at the theatre represented in any crime statistics. I think the last person shot in a theatre was Abraham Lincoln.
Let's not encourage any of that.
If all races are going to play that game, I mean, like, are white people allowed to feel unsafe around black people? I'd have thought that'd be a horrifically racist thing to do.
I think it would be too. The whole thing's racist, isn't it? This is the biggest question I have about the whole thing is how can it be determined that this is progress?
Yeah.
This is not progress in any way, shape or form, is it?
No.
This is putting people back into silos and saying you'd be much better off without those white people looking at you.
Yeah.
Just enjoy the show.
It's grabbing Rosa Parks and saying, no, you get down the end of that bus. That's your special safe space.
It's PR. It's just to get us talking
about it. Yeah, what are we talking
about?
Yeah, I'm going now.
This isn't good when it's PR.
No, this whole story is just PR, isn't it?
OK, well, moving on, we've got The Guardian again, and the communist elites who rule over us have found a new way to punish the people who generate wealth in society, Paul.
Yeah, we'll find out if this ever comes to fruition. The G20 group of the world's most powerful countries is exploring plans for a global maximum tax.
Minimum
tax.
We've already got a maximum.
They have got a maximum tax.
Mathematically, we could calculate that one.
This is for the world's 3,000 billionaires, by the way, to prevent a race to the bottom and has enabled the super rich to pay less tax. Now, I don't think... I mean, it sounds rather lovely. Sounds like an ideal view of the world, and perhaps the Guardian believe this too, and the billionaires probably could pay a little bit more. However, I don't think it's going to happen for two reasons. One thing, billionaires are cleverer than politicians, so it doesn't matter if there's 20 of them in a room, billionaires are going to outsmart them. And also, billionaires prop up every single one of those leaders. Yeah. So there's no way that this is going to happen. If it happens in some form, then they would have already figured out the loopholes to go through at the back. So ultimately, I don't think you're ever going to get through this unless you make the whole world communist, which is almost what you want.
Oh, I love the idea. Well, I don't love tax, but I love other people paying tax.
Yeah, exactly.
The idea of billionaires chipping in. I don't think it doesn't sit right that billionaires can pay a lower rate than people on minimum wage. But it's the G20. We need to remember that. So that 21st country is just going to drop out its tax rate and all the money's going to go in there. So it will be impossible to chase this. Was it this week? There was the first private mission to the moon. You know what rich people are like? They probably opened a bank there now because they love keeping their money offshore, off-planet. Yeah, it broke a leg when it landed, but there is now a private lander on the moon. If you call it a bank, and that's where the money's going to be, isn't it? But they're after billionaires. I'm not sure billionaires are the people who hoard the wealth in the same way. The ones we see are the ones who do stupid projects. They spend tons on going into space and all the other stupid things.
But that's pushing the boundaries of human endeavour.
I'm in favour of it. It gets money. Stupid billionaires are the best thing to get money back into circulation.
Yeah.
It's the millionaires who just keep it.
And also, billionaires are really good and efficient at allocating capital. That's how they became billionaires in most cases, unless they inherited it. Like Elon Musk, has pretty much built himself up and he's made amazing businesses. So, from my point of view, we should tax poor people who are obviously rubbish at money and give the money to the billionaires who will use it wisely to generate wealth and advance humanity.
Good news, that's already happening.
It's not happening. It's not happening.
The gap between the rich and the poor is getting wider, so you'll eventually get your utopia.
No, the inequality doesn't mean that poor people are paying more tax. That just means that poor people are still bad at earning money.
Poor people are getting poorer because the value of money drops and they still have a small amount.
No, but I mean, money's always a sort of fungible, flexible token. So, I mean, inflation affects everybody. The value of everybody's money drops.
The worth of anything is how much you can outbid someone else for.
OK.
So if billionaires can buy, what is it, something like there's a handful of people who own 40% of all the assets in the world. They make the rest of us poorer by being so rich.
No, they don't. They make us richer. Elon Musk makes us richer by making things that provide value to us. Somebody buys a Tesla, that provides immense value to them. Starlink, anything that he makes that they use, that's generating value, generating wealth in the world. I think we should slash welfare and hand all that money to billionaires. It's the only thing that makes sense. Anyway, I'm the host, so I'm right. I'm moving on with the times now, and politicians are calling for a national assisted dying strategy. If it's politicians, I'm happy to do it with a brick, Steve.
We need a national assisted dying strategy. No need. The nation is it's dying on its own, isn't it? But that's not what they mean. It's a debate that's back in the news because Esther Ranson has joined Dignitas. This is why it's been a debate and we're talking about it. A lovely woman. I interviewed her years ago. Look, so I feel terrible that I'm the kind of person that will point out the irony that she hosted That's Life. But I am. So there's a report on assisted dying that basically says we need to talk about it now because parts of the UK might actually get this law before other parts do. So I suppose people wouldn't be going off to Switzerland, they'd be going off to either the Isle of Man or Jersey are thinking about it. We do need to have the MPs step up, have a discussion about this. Keir Starmer's in favour of a free vote, so maybe we will get some sort of movement on it. But I'm in favour of it. Vulcans like it, so I'm in favour.
But, Paul, I mean, I'm concerned. We've seen in Canada, they've legalised medically assisted dying, and now they've sort of gone too far down the slope on the other side, and they're allowing people to get to be euthanized if they're depressed, if they have like some kind of mental issue, and if they're young as well. So I think there's a 22-year-old. The mother just found out this 22-year-old boy. I mean, he was blind in one eye and he had diabetes and was depressed. That was it, though. These are all things that you can recover from or live with. And the mother found that he'd made an appointment behind her back to have himself killed by the Canadian government. Because obviously the Canadian government's like, oh, we can save some money here. We can save $20 a week on prescription payments. They're all for killing people.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, it does look like a cynical way to tackle overpopulation, but I'm not sure that it is.
Yeah.
What I'm very interested in is psychology of this. What was the tipping point? Because it isn't Esther Ranson. Esther Ranson was a big story with Dignitas because, unfortunately, she wants to go out the way she wants to go out.
Yeah.
There's nothing unfortunate about that. Unfortunately, she's ill. However, this argument used to be quite cut and dry, and people used to say, "Well, hang on, we're very uncomfortable with this. Perhaps we shouldn't do this." All of a sudden, it's just become open season, and someone like Keir Starmer's very, very keen, which makes me slightly nervous.
Right. Well, the Telegraph now, and Liz Truss is forgettable. Apparently, I'm guessing whoever wrote this doesn't have a mortgage, Paul.
Yeah, Liz Truss is the most forgettable British Prime Minister, said the world's only leap year newspaper. Of course, it's the 29th of February today, so it's one of those rare leap days. And this is a politically incorrect French newspaper, believe it or not. They're most famous for their cartoons. Le Boucher de Super. I think that's right.
You have just failed your French.
I think I might have done.
That's right.
Is it anywhere near right?
Boucher de Super.
Yeah, come on. Hey, if it's not, it should be. That's what I say. Only publishes every...
Too, Rodney.
Yeah, lovely. Bonnet de douche, Steve. Bonnet de douche. Every 4 years on the 29th of Feb, it distributes just 200,000 copies across France. Amongst its things, it said also that the Olympics should have a Winston Churchill Wooden Spoon Award. I mean, I like the sound of these guys. I like the cut of their jib.
Yeah.
I mean, we're probably in danger of taking this stuff seriously and saying, you know, why are you criticising us? Look at you. They probably do. But it's just nice to know there are still newspapers out there that don't take themselves seriously.
Yeah, and it's nice to see that French people still care about us, Steve.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, but I think you're right. They're wrong about Liz Truss being forgettable. Very memorable.
Yeah.
Because not only the mortgage thing, no one will ever say cheese markets without doing it in that voice. And she will be a pub quiz answer for shortest PM and also PM when the Queen died. So she will be written down in books somewhere.
Amazing. Well, we've made it halfway. Stay with us to find out how thousands of civil servants can be fired and why a school made false eyelashes part of their uniform. See you in a couple of minutes.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yeah.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially, just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, you know, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, you know, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Welcome back to Headliners. We've got the Mail now, and civil servants will be replaced by AI. Seems like overkill. Most civil servants could be replaced with a wooden spoon with a face drawn on it, Steve.
So far, you're on the fence. Let's see what you think of reply one. Civil servants will be replaced by AI chatbots. This is Oliver Dowden who's been saying this, unveiled a £110 million plan to do this. I mean, great. No one really knows how to use ChatGPT yet, so there's a bit of hyperbole here, like Black Rod will be a robot. You can predict anything you want. But it should happen. The one thing we know about the public sector is its flaw is efficiency. If you can bring in efficiency, you should. This doesn't even have to be about hating civil servants, because, don't worry, by the way, I mean, the AI will still be equally as woke. You can still get all angry and call it the blob.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it'll be tech companies, so everyone hates them already. But it's the fact that we're launching a £110 million drive to save money. So already we're out of pocket, and when it fails...
But it's going to save a huge amount of money, an estimated £24 billion a year.
Yeah, they'll know. It's the government. Government and IT. Have they ever coalesced in a way that's worked? So
I believe this time it's going to work.
He said, remember how much the size of the civil service has grown with the EU exit preparedness. We should have got ChatGPT to negotiate Brexit. It would have done better.
Yeah.
It only gets like 4,000 words, and it could have come up with a better plan.
Yeah. I mean, Paul, what do you make of this? I think it's fantastic. And also, I think the utilisation of tech and innovation, such as AI, could mean that we're told by economists all the time that we need to have open borders and mass immigration to fill roles for jobs. Why not let computers do it?
Jeepers creepers, that's what I've got to say. This is outrageous. The idea that we would use ChatGPT to replace... I mean... Every AI has got a base program, OK, which is written, it seems to be, by the wokest people in the world. So it doesn't matter what you do with it, it's still going to be politically driven. So you either need to get you writing it, Leo. Well, get you and Steve to write it. That'd be an idea. If you and Steve write it, we might get a nice little centrist...
It won't be as good as the AI, to be honest.
No, but I mean, the idea that ChatGPT is going to replace all civil servants is rubbish, really. I don't see...
Yeah. And also, if they use Google AI, it'll only serve black people, because it's inherently racist.
And we won't be able to watch.
Yeah. Moving on, we've got the Telegraph now, and transgender women who commit violent crimes will be recorded as men. Why are men getting the blame for what these stunning and brave women do, Paul?
Yeah.
This isn't fair.
Cool beans.
Women need to do better.
Downing Street urges police forces to put offenders such as cat killer Scarlett Blake down as a male unless they are legally changed their gender. So, we either need to start to accept that this is progress, or we are going to have to accept that there are a lot more female sexual predators out there, because...
Female, you mean male?
Well, this is the point, isn't it? If we say that this particular person who identifies as a female is a female, then that's going to drive the statistic. I mean, we're talking Steve's language here. I don't want to say like statistics and data.
Oh.
This Steve is well, Steve's not wearing any trousers, so this is weird for me at the moment already. But I just don't see. For me, as a trad guy, this seems absolutely mental, right? That was a geezer who blended a cat and then killed another geezer.
Yeah.
And then was trying to get sentenced to a female prison.
Referred to as a cat killer rather than a human killer. I'd have thought the human was by far...
Well, don't kill cats, Leo, but...
crime there. But, I mean, men are, and by which I mean traditional men, are far more likely... We're way overrepresented in violent crime statistics, Steve. I mean, I think it's between 8 to 9 times more likely to commit violent crimes such as murders. So, and we're seeing that same overrepresentation reflected in transgender women, suggesting that their transition hasn't been completely flawless and convincing if they're still committing the same sort of crimes that men do. I mean, this seems like an obvious thing. You can't just like put on a frock and be like, I'm a woman, and then be recorded as a woman in crime statistics.
I mean, if you're worried about how it's going to skew the statistics in terms of violent crime, you wait till you see what happens to female prostate cancer. Because it's about to go through the roof. Previously, very little of a problem. But I think you read the whole story and it looks like maybe this is how it should have been recorded anyway. This is not like a new rules coming in. The fact that they're saying what's the legal sex, legally that needs to be in there. I mean, I'd say you can put the trans status in the data. Why not just have another field? And that way, J.K. Rowling was saying this is not our crimes. If you actually mark down the trans community, they'd also not be our crimes. We can get rid of... Let's all just not get crimes.
Yeah.
This is the goal, apparently, is
yeah,
to try
that's
not
a really
be
good point,
associated with other crimes.
Because we still get thrown under the bus, don't we?
That's one of the crimes.
Yes, that bus must have a lot of people under it, because I'm constantly using that phrase, chucking people under the bus. But This, interestingly, like Steve makes a very good point, this was never... He was always going to be sent to a male prison.
Yeah.
It's only the way it was reported that became problematic.
So this is just advice for dopey civil servants who were going to record it wrong because they've been to diversity training. OK, well, the Mail now, and a school is making false eyelashes part of the uniform. How will teachers be able to tell who the drag queens are, Steve?
So school sparks were out for making false eyelashes part of its uniform, is what it says there. You read that and you think, what, you're forced to wear them?
Yeah.
The teachers will be... If they're not long enough, you'll get detention.
And the eyelashes have to be in the school colours.
Of course, yeah, that makes sense now. But it turns out it was more the school accepts the wearing of false eyelashes. We're not really being part of the uniform, but fair enough, that's how they phrase it. The school was doing it in Sevenoaks, the Noel Academy, because they'd noticed girls are wearing them. They were taking time off to get them removed if you're not allowed to wear them in school, or just not coming to school. So they dropped the rule. One mother said, we're in a society being run by children. Another mother said, it's quite worrying because they're going to start getting attention of older men. My daughter's quite tall and slim. She already does look older. And then it hit me. If this is your kids, you stop wearing long eyelashes. Why is it the school's job all of a sudden to raise the kids to not wear eyelashes?
Yeah.
Do some mothering in this. The mother said, what are the school going to say if the girls end up pregnant? Probably going to blame me for that as well. Take some responsibility in this. Why is it the school that has to do all of it?
That might become compulsory as well.
Oh, look at you.
Everybody's got to get pregnant. I mean, the balance of power or authority between adults and children has shifted somewhat. But even since our time, you know, we grew up we're the greatest generation, Generation X. It's undisputed. However, since then, it seems that kids are being listened to more, which seemed like a good idea at first, because while we don't want them to be chimney sweeps like they were in the Victorian age, but also we don't want to start listening to them and taking their advice.
They're idiots.
You know, I mean, Greta Thunberg is one of the best-known children in the world. She's not a child anymore, although she does look like one. You know, we have started to give way a lot of power. OK, and if that's the case, we need to just accept that the future's just full of fake eyelashes and Greta Thunbergs.
OK, I'll go out and buy some. Moving on, we've got a story in The Guardian about woke comedy. And woke comedy is a bit like women's football. It gets written about a lot in The Guardian, but it's terrible. Anyway, this article shows how it gets made, Paul.
Why would you not want to be woke? Inside the TV comedy workshops, infuriating the right-wing press.
Oh, I'm so angry.
Well, this is the first I'd seen of it, actually, and looking at the photograph, there are lots of people in that photograph that I know.
We can see the photograph
there are some good comedians in that photograph. I'm not going to name them, because they don't like
John Maher's all right.
Yeah, John Mather's great.
Good, in fact.
Well, Stone's great. Fiona Ridgewell's in that. She's fantastic. And the lady who writes, largely writes this article, or is the main contributor, is a lady called Sian Davis. And I've gigged with Sian, and she has actually, over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, if you exclude the pandemic, she has helped get a lot of working-class people up to Edinburgh because the cost is so expensive. The only thing I would say...
Is that to get them there and keep them there so the rest of the country can get on with their life?
Not to clean the rubbish up or anything.
Without being bothered by working-class people.
But one thing I would say, it's like...
Maybe use an island next
The type of working-class people are always the same.
Yeah.
I consider myself working-class, grew up in a council estate. I don't see that represented in the same way it could do. Everything leans a certain way. I'm not suggesting for a minute Sian's doing anything wrong, and there are some good people in that.
Oh,
but
man, all the comedians who say, oh, I'm working class, it's like, man, you got a MacBook Pro, you never, like, you're not working class. Grew up in a nice big house, your dad had to buy a used car once, so you think you're working class? Man.
It is mad.
Cutlery, you little ponce.
Sorry, Steve, you probably want to talk about this, but I am impassioned by some of the stuff here. I just think everything comes at it from a very slanted political angle. Everything.
Yeah.
The idea that
some of the comedians are terrible. Like Tom Mayhew is a terrible comedian. And also, he's made a career out of being poor. He's all like, oh, I'm so poor, I can't afford anything. And then he's got some success. It's like, what, you're still going on about not being able to afford the bus to the studio, BBC studio? Like, come on, you must have some money now. Stop being so useless. Why don't you get better at comedy and make more money, Tom?
And I was just going to say, it's a classic example of each side of the argument thinks the definition of the word woke's different, so no one's arguing about the same thing anymore.
Yeah.
That headline just makes sense to them.
My definition.
Of course, and they're all getting paid to do that job, and it's difficult to get paid as a comedian.
It is. Anyway, The Guardian now with the good news that young people are reading lots of books, probably because they're the one thing that can't be tweaked by tech execs to be fake and anti-white and racist, Steve?
UK in the midst of a boom of book clubs as Generation Z hobbies change. Once it was nightclubs and sport clubs, and now they're going to book clubs. This is Generation Z. They don't drink, they don't have sex, they go to book clubs. And let's remember they're a generation that say, OK, boomer, you're living as a boomer. You're like a retiree. What are you doing with your time? But the trend, it says, coincides with celebs who are launching book clubs. Dua Lipa, I've learned Italian on her app, it's great. And there was one book owner, I just want to read this out, a book club owner who says that the book club is a safe space and the conversation segues into real-life issues and discussions about being lonely in London. Sounds like a great night out. You then conference call the Samaritans? Whoa, Struth.
Yeah, no wonder there's a push for assisted dying. Paul, what do you make of this?
Well, it's I make of it what Steve makes of it. I mean, book clubs have opened up as a safe space for communities, they say in here. Yeah. It's because this is in The Guardian. It just drives me mad. It's like they can't even have a book club that isn't a safe space now. Book clubs aren't a safe space.
Yeah, has there ever been a book club that's an unsafe space?
No,
I mean,
I got one book.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few.
You're in that one that week. Oh, who picked this?
I mean, if it's 50 Shades of Grey and there's just one woman and 3 geezers there, then it's not a safe space, is it?
Anyway, just one section to go. In a couple of minutes, we'll have drugs in the Olympics and drugs in Paul Pogba. See you then.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Look, you're a respected royal biographer, and there are so many people who are on the sort of royal gravy train, if you will, people who are making a career out of gossip and speculation. But yours very much built on confidence and sources and fact. And you don't offer an opinion that often inside your book. But when you do, I suppose, therefore, it carries a bit more weight. So when you say that the Sussexes are easily offended and, you know, effectively pretty prickly, what do you mean and what have you based that on?
Well, on numerous their riposte to any given situation in their books, in their TV interviews. And let's not forget, I mean, a lot of TV interviews, 6-part Netflix drama, Spare, you see time and again that they feel that they feel resentful. They feel that, you know, something hasn't gone their way and that this is part of some sort of calculated campaign against them. And actually, I mean, when you've got a fast-moving story, I mean, for example, in my book, I go into those frantic hours after the death of the Queen, and everybody's trying to sort themselves out. And Harry writes in his book Spare how you know, no one will return his calls and he can't get through to anyone, and it's sort of it's just all a bit me. And actually, the whole kind of royal machine, if you like, is a team effort. And I just think it's very sad because, you know, Harry and Meghan, they had such potential. And now when we do tend to hear from them, it's on a royal matter, it's just to say how miserable they were being royal. And that was, you know, they were royal for whatever it was, 600-700 days. They're post-royal now for over twice that time. Can you envisage a scenario where they're back in England and they're back in royal life? I can't envisage a situation where they're back, as it were, as part of the sort of royal working unit, but I could certainly see it becoming a kind of normal thing for them to keep.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the final section of Headliners. Kicking off this section with The Guardian, with Olympic czar Sebastian Coe clearly threatened by a new and better Olympics that allows athletes to take steroids and cocaine, Paul.
This is brilliant. I didn't know anything about this till I read this story today. The World Athletics President, Sir Sebastian Coe, of course, has hit out at plans for enhanced games, the enhanced games, that would allow athletes to take steroids and other performance-enhancing drugs, and warn that anyone who competes would be banned for a long time. And yes, because it's not sport, is it? The idea in the Olympics is that it's drug-free. Well, let me get to that. Because
sport on drugs.
It is sport on drugs, which would be brilliant. Yeah. I'm not saying it wouldn't be. I'm just saying the two aren't compatible. One is about pure human ability to do something. The other one is about roided up people smashing the living daylights out of one another, and I want to watch that. That's for sure. I mean, I think that would be good TV.
Yeah, I mean, they'll have to be careful what drugs they take, because not all drugs are performance enhancing.
That's true.
No.
A lot of watching TV, eating crisps. That could be a new sport. I love it. Sebastian Coe gets upset. Even uses the B word, you know, the one that means testicles.
Does, yeah.
I imagine really small testicles because of all the steroids. But you're right. It's a weird... Calling it enhanced doesn't tell you what it's... So it makes you think fake bosoms.
Yeah.
And that is the 100 metres that we'd all like to watch.
The fake bosom 100. Yeah, just mainly men with fake bosoms as well. Lactating.
We've got the Independent now settling the debate over what came first, the chicken or the egg. Hey, just be glad you both came, Steve.
Yeah, scientists finally discover whether the chicken or the egg came first. Before we get into the story, it's egg. Of course it is, but let's see what they say.
Yeah.
It's a question that humans have been asking themselves for almost since time began. Now, they haven't, but if they have, they've worked it out by now, it's egg. Louis Vazillon, a scientist and technology educator, says eggs are older than chickens. Yep. And then he said, but it's not just about saying that dinosaurs came before chickens. What about the chicken egg? Which came first, the chicken or the chicken egg? At some point in evolutionary history, there were no chickens, two birds that were almost chickens but not quite laid an egg. Do you know what? You might just as well ask yourself the question, which came first, the chicken or the egg that chicken came from? And you've answered the question. How does it take any longer? It's not a riddle.
So have you got anything to add to this policy?
I do not want to challenge that theory.
No.
I don't look clever as it is, but if I come up with another theory, then
An egg conspiracy.
Yeah. I need Lewis to make me look clever, Leo, you know that.
OK. We've got The Telegraph now with another woke remake of a television classic. This time is The Blue Planet with gay sex scenes, Paul.
Oh, man, there's some serious jiggery-pokery going on here. Humpback sex. Jeepers creepers. I mean, it's almost like someone's making me say these words. Humpback sex photograph for the first time. Right. Mental, and both whales are male. Who cares? Right, first, let me do this story, right, and then we'll get into the consent issue.
We've got a photo of it.
Oh, well, why haven't we?
There it is. Oh no, that was you two.
Which one am I?
Two male humpback whales were reliably informed by scientists that is a photo of them having sex. I think this is post-watershed.
I think there's a consent issue, but let's see what they're saying here. A pair of humpback whales were observed having sex for the first time ever by scientists. Now, who's going out there specifically looking to find that out? I guess maybe they weren't. But they go into quite a bit of detail about how penetrative it was, etc., and then they can't quite figure out why it would be two males. It's love, Leo. Yeah. This is 2024. It's love. They've gone out into the middle of the ocean for a bit of special time, and they've got some scientist with his camera there taking photographs. Outrageous.
Yeah. And let's just quickly finish on this story about Paul Pogba. Just be careful if you're out, because some drugs accidentally fell into his mouth, apparently, Steve.
Oh, this is yeah, I can go with this one. He's got 4 years for doping to effectively end his World Cup career. He's ageing out of it. They've banned him for 4 years. But yeah, it turns out he's been banned from football. I believe that's a game. The former Man United midfielder, he took a supplement that somehow has this androgen thing in there by accident. And I've read it a few times. They don't tell you what the supplement is. Because I'd love to have a bit of this. I'm just on vitamin B like an idiot. If I could get some of this in my life...
You could be in the enhanced Olympics.
Just a massive pair.
Sebastian Coe angry. Your large breasts. 10 seconds, have you got anything?
No, I'm not competing with large breasts. End on that.
Do you want to see jiggery-pokery again?
I'd love to see some... Yeah, jiggery-pokery, cool beans.
Well, the show is nearly over, so let's take another quick look at Friday's front pages. The Daily Mail leads with Britain's broken borders. The Telegraph has Russia flooding the West with migrants. The Guardian leads with more than 100 Palestinians die in chaos surrounding Gaza aid convoy. The Times leads with there's nothing to stop another police killer like Cousins. The iNews has 2p tax cut in doubt after gloomier forecast on UK economy. And finally, the Daily Star with a story about the hairy biker that sadly died. My best friend is on a journey that for now I can't follow. And those were your front pages, and that's all we have time for. Thank you to my guests Paul Cox and Steve Allen. We're back tomorrow at 11 p.m. with some other people. See you then. And if you're watching at 5 a.m, stay tuned for breakfast. And coming up after the break, Tom Harwood will be taking you through tonight's by-election results. What's in store, Tom?
It was meant to be so predictable. A presumed safe Labour seat was meant to be sealed up, but then two twin disturbances in what could have been a very predictable by-election. First, of course, the war in Gaza, and second, the disowning of the Labour Party's own candidate. It's thrown the night wide open. George Galloway is already claiming victory here, standing against the Labour Party, standing against the other parties, but also Reform UK has Simon Danchuk, the former Rochdale MP, standing as their candidate. Could he have a look in too? It's all to play for in the most unpredictable by-election in a very long time. We'll be going through every twist and turn as the counting is already underway. So stay with us here on GBNews from midnight through to 6 a.m. We'll be joined with A-list guests as we unpick what's happening in Rochdale.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, Alex Burgill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. After a wet day in the southeast, that rain is going to clear away, and that will lead to a touch of frost in some places before a swathe of more heavy, persistent rain pushes into parts